Have you ever looked around at the people you love, the ones you've sacrificed for, supported through their storms, stood beside when no one else would, and wondered, why do they suddenly look at you like you're the problem? Why does it feel like the more you grow, the more they pull away? Maybe it started subtly, a cold shoulder here, a sarcastic comment there, and then one day you realize you're being treated like a stranger in your own life, like you're no longer welcome in spaces you used to hold together. And the most painful part? It's not your enemies turning away. It's the ones you raised, the one you called your best friend, the people who said they'd always be there. You ask yourself, what did I do wrong? But deep down, something in you already knows. You didn't betray them. You betrayed the version of you they depended on, the one who didn't have boundaries, the one who always said yes, the one who made herself small so everyone else could feel big. And when you started growing, quietly, inwardly, steadily, they felt it, even if they never said it out loud. Because growth is loud, even when it's silent. It echoes in every corner of a room. It shakes the foundations of every unspoken agreement you made with people who loved the weaker version of you. Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But most people aren't ready for that kind of mirror. They don't want to see their own fear of change. They don't want to confront the parts of themselves they've ignored for decades. So what do they do instead? They blame you. They criticize you. They punish you for doing what they were too afraid to even attempt, becoming whole. And here's the truth you were never told. You didn't lose them. They lost access to the version of you that made their dysfunction feel comfortable. They're not angry at your growth. They're terrified of what your growth reveals about their stagnation. So if you've ever been told you've changed like it's a crime, if you felt the slow, silent rejection of becoming someone who finally respects herself, then this message is for you. Because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why the people closest to you turned against you, and why that may be the greatest sign that you're finally on the right path. You didn't mean to threaten anyone. You weren't trying to make a statement. You just wanted peace. So you started healing, not in some dramatic, flashy, overnight way, but in the quiet, difficult decisions that no one else could see. You stopped saying yes when you meant no. You stopped overextending yourself just to be liked. You stopped chasing people who made you feel like an afterthought. You chose yourself, and in doing so, you became dangerous. Because healing isn't just personal, it's political. It disrupts the roles, the patterns, the unspoken agreements that hold families, friendships, even entire social groups together. It forces everyone around you to face something they've spent their entire lives avoiding, themselves. Carl Jung called this the shadow. It's not some spooky spiritual thing. It's psychological. It's real. It's the parts of ourselves we don't want to admit exist. The bitterness, the envy, the fear, the insecurity, the deep unhealed wounds that we hide under smiles, busyness, and pretending to have it all together. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. Most people will do anything to avoid confronting their own shadow, even if it means turning on the person who reflects it, because that's what your healing does. It becomes a mirror, not the kind they can walk away from, but the kind that follows them, because they remember who you used to be. They remember how you used to tolerate mistreatment, laugh off disrespect, minimize your needs. And now you're someone else. Not angry, not loud, not dramatic, just clear, grounded, unapologetic. And that clarity is blinding to those still lost in confusion. It's why they say, you think you're better than us now. It's why they call you selfish, cold, or distant. Because your growth quietly screams in rooms where everyone's still playing small. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But that kind of self-awareness, that kind of radical honesty, it takes courage, and not everyone's ready for that. So instead of looking inward, they project outward. They make you the villain. They convince themselves that you're difficult ungrateful, arrogant, all so they don't have to ask the one question that would unravel everything. What does her peace reveal about my chaos? See, they liked you better when you were wounded, when you were endlessly available, when you smiled through the pain and didn't make waves, when you were the good girl, the strong one, the selfless mother, the always there friend. But you can't build peace by pretending. You can't keep betraying yourself just to keep others comfortable. That's not love. That's emotional servitude. And let's be honest, if the only version of you they can tolerate is the one that's constantly hurting herself, that's not connection, that's control. You didn't ask to be the mirror. But here you are, reflecting back everything they haven't healed, and it makes them squirm. It makes them angry. It makes them cruel. But here's the deeper truth. It's not about you. It was never about you. It's about the parts of them they've refused to meet, the childhood wounds that never got addressed, the self-worth they never developed, the voice they never found. In your presence, your peace, your refusal to abandon yourself again, it reminds them of that. So they reject you, not because you become too much, but because you stop being too little. And I know it hurts. God, it hurts. To be called selfish for finally loving yourself. To be blamed for the discomfort your healing brings. To feel like the villain in someone else's story when all you did was tell the truth. But that pain, that rejection, it's sacred because it means the mirror is working. It means you've stepped out of the role and into your real self. And yes, it costs you relationships. But what it gives you in return is priceless. Freedom. There's a moment in every woman's life, quiet but undeniable, when she realizes she's tired of playing the role. The good daughter, the selfless wife, the strong mother, the always there friend. And it hits her like a wave. She's been performing her whole life, not living, performing. The problem is, when you stop playing the role others assigned you, they don't say thank you. They say, how dare you? Carl Jung called this moment the collapse of persona, the death of the false identity we wear just to survive in a world that never truly saw us. He said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And when you start doing that, when you finally say, I'm no longer going to abandon myself just to make others comfortable, you shatter an illusion, not just your own, theirs. Because your old role served a purpose. It made others feel safe. It made the system work. It allowed people to avoid their own work because you were doing it all. You carried the emotional load of your family. You were the fixer in your marriage. You were the friend who always picked up, even when your world was falling apart. And they got used to that version of you, depended on her, needed her. But she wasn't whole. She was exhausted. She was silently breaking. She was disappearing. And now that you're saying no, now that you're resting instead of rescuing, now that you're choosing peace over people-pleasing, they say you've changed. But what they really mean is, you're no longer useful to me in the way I want you to be. See, most people don't love you. They love the version of you that gives them what they need. And when that version dies, they grieve, not out of love, but out of loss of control. Carl Jung said something radical. The moment you stop playing the role others assigned you, you trigger their projections. That means everything they've buried in themselves, the fear, the shame, the helplessness, gets dumped on you. They say you're selfish now, when really you've just stopped self-abandoning. They say you're cold, when you've finally found boundaries. They say you're too much, because you're no longer making yourself less. And here's the part they'll never admit. They knew the role you played was killing you, but they were never going to tell you to stop, because it benefited them. You made everything easier. You smoothed over tension. You carried weight that wasn't yours. You were the emotional glue holding broken things together. But what they never asked was, who holds you? Who listens when you're falling apart? Who sees you beyond the role? And when the answer is no one, You have two choices: keep shrinking or finally expand. You chose expansion. You chose truth. You chose life. And it cost you, because most people don't want the real you. They want the version of you that doesn't make them feel small, the version that doesn't ask hard questions, the version that keeps the peace at her own expense. But Carl Jung reminds us, individuation, the journey of becoming your true self, isn't just personal. It threatens everyone still clinging to illusion. So they push back. They guilt trip you. They accuse you. They ice you out. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've become a mirror they can't stand to look into anymore. And I want you to hear this clearly. You are not wrong for changing. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are not a bad woman, bad mother, bad friend, for finally becoming who you actually are. What's happening to you is a kind of spiritual shedding, a death of everything false, and the people who can't accept that, they were never really loving you. They were loving your role. Now that you're stepping off the stage, the spotlight has turned around, and it's showing all the places where they haven't grown. That's not your burden to carry anymore. So if you're feeling alone, if people are walking away, if the silence around you is growing louder, remember this: you're not being abandoned. You're being revealed. And what you're stepping into, this version of you that is clear, sovereign, and no longer apologizing for existing. She doesn't need the crowd. She doesn't need applause. She just needs you to keep going, to keep choosing her, to never go back. There's a quiet kind of revolution that happens when a woman reclaims her wholeness, not when she becomes louder, but when she becomes still, still enough to hear her own voice again, still enough to remember who she was before the world told her who to be. You see, for most of your life, you were split. One version of you was public, presentable, pleasant, polite, predictable. You smiled when you didn't feel like it. You agreed just to keep the peace. You took care of everyone except yourself. And the other version of you, she stayed hidden. She carried the anger, the grief, the unmet needs, the quiet resentment, the parts of you that never fit the role. Carl Jung called this split the separation of self from the shadow, and he warned, as long as the shadow is repressed, it governs our life from the unconscious. In other words, you were being ruled by the parts of you you refused to face, and so was everyone else. But now you've done the work. You've looked in the mirror and refused to look away. You've named what hurt you. You've stopped apologizing for taking up space. You've stitched yourself back together, not to become perfect, but to become whole. And that wholeness, that's what makes you dangerous. Not in the way people think, not because you're bitter or unkind or difficult, but because your very existence now confronts everything that others are still trying to avoid. When you stop hiding your shadow, when you integrate your pain, your power, your truth, you become a mirror that cannot be ignored. And for those who are still fragmented, that mirror is unbearable. You're calm now, but your calm reminds them of their anxiety. You're confident, but your confidence reminds them of their self-doubt. You've found peace, and that peace is deafening to someone who's still living in chaos. They say, you've changed, but what they mean is, you've escaped, and I haven't. They can't say that out loud, so they criticize, they distance, they whisper behind your back. They call you too much, too different, too full of yourself. But it's not really about you. It never was. It's about the parts of them they're not ready to face. Because when a woman becomes whole, she becomes a mirror to everyone still living in pieces. Carl Jung said, "We despise in others what we have not accepted in ourselves." So if they despise your strength, it's because they've disowned their own. If they mock your clarity, it's because they're still tangled in confusion. If they call your boundaries selfish, it's because they've never felt safe enough to create their own. Here's the thing no one wants to say out loud. Most people don't want you to heal, not because they're evil, but because your healing forces them to confront their own need to grow. And growth is terrifying when you've built your whole life around avoiding it. It's safer for them if you stay small. It's easier if you keep nodding, keep giving, keep shrinking. But that version of you is gone. She had to die for the real you to live. So now you're standing in your wholeness, not broken, not bitter, just honest, just grounded, just fully yourself. And here's what you probably noticed. Your wholeness makes people uncomfortable. Not because there's anything wrong with you, but because they're still pretending. They're still performing. They're still living behind masks they don't even realize they're wearing. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear to survive in society. But when you take off your mask, when you stop performing and start living, you make others question their own performance. And most people don't want that. They don't want questions. They want comfort. They want control. But you didn't come here to make others comfortable. You didn't come this far to stay small. You came to become whole, to remember, to return to yourself. And yes, it costs you. It costs you relationships that only worked when you were fragmented. It costs you approval from people who only love the mask. It costs you comfort because truth is rarely comfortable. But what it gives you is so much greater. Peace, clarity, freedom, self-respect, alignment. It gives you a life that is yours, finally truly yours. And here's what Carl Jung said that you need to hold on to when the loneliness creeps in. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who they wanted, not who they trained you to be, not who they needed you to play, but who you were underneath it all along. So if they leave, let them. If they misunderstand, so be it. If they call your wholeness selfish, smile gently, because you know it's not. You're not selfish. You're sacred. You're not too much. You're finally enough for yourself. And maybe they can't handle that, but that's their work, not yours. Your work is to stay whole, to keep growing, to keep living, to never go back to pieces just to make others feel whole, because you were never meant to live fragmented. You were never meant to live in hiding. You were meant to become a full, radiant, rooted woman, whole, free, and finally home to yourself. No one warns you that when you begin to heal, when you begin to become whole, the first people to resist your transformation will be the ones you love the most. It's not the strangers. It's not the coworkers. It's not even society at large. It's your own family, your closest friends, the ones you thought would celebrate your growth. They're the ones who suddenly turn cold, distant, even hostile. Why? Carl Jung explained it best. He said that we are born into a system, a family, a culture, a network. And that system doesn't just give us life, it assigns us roles. Maybe you were the caretaker. Maybe you were the peacemaker. Maybe you were the responsible one, the overachiever, the emotional dumping ground, the one who was always fine. But none of those roles were ever your truth. They were survival masks. They were strategies to feel loved, safe, and accepted. And when you begin the process of healing, when you begin to say, I'm no longer willing to play this role, you're not just making a personal decision. You're threatening the emotional economy of the system itself. Carl Jung called this process individuation. It's the path of becoming your true self, separate from the expectations, projections, and conditioning of those around you. And here's the hard truth. Most families are not built on truth. They're built on roles, silence, avoidance, and unspoken rules. So when you break those rules, when you begin to tell the truth, not just with words, but with your boundaries, your choices, your presence. You disturb the system. Suddenly, the daughter who always stayed quiet is speaking up. The woman who always said yes is saying no. The one who always put herself last is finally choosing herself. And that terrifies people. Because if you can change, if you can walk away from your old role, then what does that say about them? It says they could have too, but they didn't. So instead of celebrating your courage, they question it, they diminish it, they resent it, they say you've become selfish, you're acting brand new, you think you're better than us now. But none of that is true. What's true is you're finally becoming who you were always meant to be. And for people who never did their own healing, that truth feels like betrayal. Carl Jung said, your individuation will always be met with resistance from the collective. And in this case, your collective is your family and your oldest friends. They built an identity around the version of you that no longer exists, and now they don't know where they stand. So they lash out. Not because you're wrong, but because your transformation forces them to look at everything they buried. And that's not easy. It's much easier to say, you've changed, than to ask, why haven't I? So what do? They distance themselves. They stop calling. They exclude you from family gatherings. They make passive-aggressive comments. They tell others you're just going through a phase. They tell you to go back to how you were. But there's no going back. Not when you've tasted freedom. Not when you've remembered your name. And this is where the grief sets in. Because while healing brings clarity, it also brings loss. Loss of connection, loss of familiarity, loss of belonging, at least in the places you once found it. You start to realize that some people didn't love you. They loved the version of you that served them. The agreeable, available, overly giving version. And now that she's gone, they don't know what to do with this new, authentic version of you. But here's what Jung would remind you. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, even if it costs you the approval of the people who once called you theirs, because your healing isn't just about you. It's about the generations that come after you. It's about ending patterns of silence, guilt, shame, and self-abandonment. It's about becoming the woman your younger self needed, and the woman your descendants will remember as the one who broke the cycle. So if your family pushes back, let them. If your friends fall away, let them. If the people closest to you no longer understand you, that's okay. You weren't born to be understood by who you were healing from. You were born to become whole, to become free, to live without apology. And maybe, just maybe, your courage will plant a seed in them. Maybe one day they'll look at your life and think, if she could become more, maybe I can too. But even if they don't, even if they never come around, you didn't do this for them. You did this for you because you were tired of performing, tired of pretending, tired of caring everyone but yourself. You don't owe anyone your old self. Your only task now is to keep going, to keep growing, to honor the woman you've become, especially when it costs you. Because that woman, she's worth the price. By now, you've probably felt it. That strange moment when it's not just your family, not just your closest friends, but it seems like the entire world is pushing back against your growth. You start setting boundaries, saying no, speaking your truth, and suddenly you're being called difficult, intense, or too much. But here's what Carl Jung discovered that will explain this completely. You're not just breaking personal patterns. You're threatening something far bigger, the collective unconscious. Jung described the collective unconscious as a vast reservoir of inherited beliefs, norms, and emotional patterns that society has passed down from generation to generation. It's what keeps people playing their assigned roles, fitting into molds, and keeping the system running smoothly. And when you start waking up, when you begin to question those unspoken rules, You don't just disrupt your family or your social circle. You disrupt the entire psychological infrastructure that keeps society in place. Think about it. Most women were taught from a young age to be nice, agreeable, selfless, to take care of others, to put everyone's needs before their own. And for decades, maybe even your entire life, you played along. But now, you're starting to say, no more. No more shrinking. No more pretending. No more sacrificing yourself on the altar of duty and tradition. And in doing that, you're stepping out of a system that depends on your silence. You are no longer predictable, no longer controllable, no longer operating from unconscious guilt and obligation. You've become dangerous, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're showing others what's possible. Jung said that when someone breaks free from unconscious patterns, the collective unconscious will often mobilize against them, like an immune system rejecting what it perceives as a threat. That's why your healing feels like rebellion. That's why your peace feels like confrontation. That's why your joy makes others uncomfortable. It's not personal, it's archetypal. You've become a symbol, a reminder that the old system is not unbreakable. And to people still trapped in that system, you're a walking disruption. Carl Jung believed that true psychological growth requires something he called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites in tension until a new consciousness emerges. That's what you're doing. You're no longer either or. You're no longer boxed into labels like soft or strong, feminine or assertive, good girl or bad woman. You're becoming whole. You're integrating both light and shadow, both nurturing and powerful, both compassionate and boundaried. And wholeness is what the collective fears most, because wholeness can't be manipulated. Wholeness can't be guilt-tripped. Wholeness can't be tamed. So what does the collective do? It shames you. It isolates you. It tries to pull you back into the mold. It whispers, you've changed. You're not like you used to be. You're making people uncomfortable. But Jung would say, that discomfort is the price of evolution. You're not here to be agreeable. You're here to be authentic. And here's the deeper truth. Every time you choose yourself, you're not just healing your own life. You're challenging the unconscious trauma your mother carried, your grandmother carried, all the generations of women who were told to sit down, stay quiet, be small. Your growth is ancestral. Your boundaries echo through bloodlines. Your truth sends shockwaves through time. And yes, people will resist. The collective will try to correct you. But Jung reminds us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Most people aren't ready for that terror. So when they attack you, when they pull away, when they label your truth as selfish, they're not reacting to you. They're reacting to the death of a system that kept them safe, even if it kept them stuck. Let them grieve it, but don't shrink for it. You weren't born to uphold the unconscious. You were born to bring light to it, to become aware, to become conscious, to become whole. Because the moment you do, you don't just change your life. You change what's possible for everyone who sees you. So if you felt like the world is against you lately, know this. You're not being attacked because you're failing. You're being resisted because you're awakening. And that is your power. You probably didn't expect it, that the more free you became, the more resistance you'd face. You thought healing would bring peace, that growing into your truth would bring more connection, more understanding, more love. But what you got instead was distance, silence, pushback, and the phrase, you've changed, said not with admiration, but with judgment. Let me tell you something Carl Jung understood better than most. Your freedom terrifies people who are still enslaved to their image. You are not being rejected because you became worse. You're being rejected because you became real. Most people aren't living freely. They're living by scripts, roles inherited from family, religion, culture, and society. They perform. They conform. They wear masks and call them personalities. Jung called this the persona, the mask we present to the world so we can survive, be accepted, and avoid conflict. But there comes a time, especially for women around midlife, when wearing that mask becomes unbearable. It's no longer enough to just be a good daughter, a good wife, a good mother, a good friend. You want to be yourself, raw, whole, alive. And the moment you begin to take off that mask, you start triggering the fear in everyone who's still glued to theirs. Because your freedom is a mirror they never asked for, but now can't look away from. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But here's the truth most won't admit. They don't want to understand themselves. They want to stay comfortable, even if that comfort is a cage. So when they see you breaking out, changing your story, breaking old patterns, speaking your truth, saying no without guilt, choosing peace over performance, they don't see freedom. They see betrayal, because deep down it reminds them they could have done that too, but they didn't, or they weren't ready. So they turn your courage into criticism. They say, you think you're better than us now. You used to be so sweet. You're so different these days. Yes, you are. Because what they call sweet was actually silent. What they call nice was actually self-abandoning. And what they call different is actually authentic. Let them mislabel you. Because Carl Jung said that the journey toward wholeness, what he called individuation, requires the death of your old identity. The persona must fall. The roles must be surrendered. The mask must be shattered. And not everyone can handle that kind of loss, especially when they built their entire relationship with you on that mask. So they mourn it, not quietly but violently, with blame, with gossip, with emotional distance. But here's the deeper truth. They're not mourning you. They're mourning the loss of control, of familiarity, of their own comfort. Because when you start making decisions based on truth instead of fear, you become unpredictable, and people fear what they can't predict. Jung believed that psychological freedom, true freedom, comes when you stop operating from the unconscious, when you stop being a puppet of other people's expectations, when you finally live as a conscious, integrated being, aware of your light, your shadow, your voice, and your power. But freedom comes with a price. Rejection from those who only knew you in your captivity. The woman you are now, she can no longer be controlled by guilt, by obligation, by shame. She doesn't say yes just to keep the peace. She doesn't shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. She doesn't apologize for taking up space. And to the unhealed, that woman is a threat, not because she's hurting anyone, but because she stopped hurting herself to make others comfortable. Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're no longer asking permission to exist. You're no longer waiting for validation. You're no longer performing for love that should have been unconditional. You've accepted yourself completely, messily, magnificently. And that kind of radical self-acceptance, it disrupts everything because it shows what's possible. And when people aren't ready to evolve, they attack the evolution in others. So if you've lost people, if they've drifted, turned cold, called you selfish, painted you as the villain, know this: they're not responding to who you are. They're reacting to who they never gave themselves permission to become. You didn't change too much. You just stopped pretending. And they can't handle the truth without facing their own. But their discomfort, it's not your responsibility. Your only responsibility now is to keep going, to keep rising, to keep choosing truth over performance, freedom over fear, self-respect over approval, because your freedom isn't selfish. It's sacred. And every time you live fully, you give silent permission to another woman to do the same. You light the way, so keep walking, even if they don't clap, even if they walk away, even if they say, you've changed. Because yes, you have. And thank God you did. Let's take a moment, not to grieve what you've lost, but to honor who you've become. Because if you've come this far, if you've endured the silence, the judgment, the loneliness that comes with healing, then you need to hear this. You are not broken. You are becoming. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also knew that privilege comes at a price. The price is shedding identities that no longer serve you. It's grieving relationships that only loved your mask, not your soul. It's walking alone, sometimes for long stretches, while the world tells you you're too much, or too different, or too awakened. But the truth is, you're exactly who you were always meant to be. You're just now remembering, because this journey back to yourself, it's not a trend. It's not a midlife crisis. It's not rebellion. It's destiny. You were never meant to live your entire life trying to fit into boxes you've outgrown. You were never meant to silence your truth to be liked. You were never meant to spend decades performing for love. You were meant to evolve, to awaken, to rise, to tear down every false layer until what's left is the pure, radiant essence of who you truly are. And yes, that kind of becoming, it will cost you comfort. It will cost you the approval of those who were never meant to walk your full journey. But what you gain is everything. You gain your voice, your peace, your clarity, your strength, and most of all, you gain yourself. The self you buried to make others happy. The self you betrayed every time you said yes when you meant no. The self you forgot while taking care of everyone else. The self you feared was too much, or not enough, or too late. That self never left you. She waited. Through all the noise, the roles, the pretending, she waited. And now finally, you're hearing her. You're remembering that life was never supposed to be about survival. It was always meant to be about wholeness. So if you feel raw, if you feel uncertain, if you feel like you're walking unfamiliar ground, that's okay. You are. Because you're not walking the old path anymore. You're not repeating old wounds, old patterns, old roles. You're forging a new way. And yes, it's lonely at first, but you'll find your people. People who love you for who you truly are. People who don't need you to shrink to feel safe. People who honor your boundaries, your depth, your evolution. They're out there. But you can't find them by being who you're not. You find them by showing up real, unapologetic, alive. Carl Jung believed that healing wasn't just personal, it was spiritual. Individuation, as he called it, is not selfish. It's sacred. Because when one woman rises into her wholeness, she makes it safer for others to do the same. So to every woman listening right now, especially the ones over 40 who've spent decades playing by rules that never fit, hear me. You are not behind. You are right on time. This is your awakening. This is your rebirth. This is your return to yourself. And yes, it's painful. Yes, it's messy. But it's also the most honest, most liberating, most powerful chapter of your life. You don't need to go back. There's nothing back there for you. The love you thought you had, it was based on performance. The peace you thought you knew, it was compliance. But now, you are building something real, from truth, from courage, from soul. And that truth will cost you, but it will also set you free. So let them say, you've changed. Smile and say, yes, I have. And I'm never going back. Because the journey back to yourself isn't a detour. It's the only path that was ever real. And no one, not your family, not your friends, not society, gets to shame you for taking it. Because this isn't just a phase. This is your evolution. This is your truth. This is your destiny. So keep going. The world may not be ready for your wholeness, but you are. And that's all that matters. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, if it felt like truth finally put into words, then don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to this channel for more soul-deep insights rooted in Jungian wisdom, psychology, and the healing journey. Share this video with a woman who's silently walking her own path back to herself. She may need this more than you know. And in the comments, tell me, what part of you are you finally reclaiming? Because the more we speak our truth, the more we give others permission to do the same. You are not alone. You are not too late. And you are exactly where your soul has been trying to lead you all along. Thank you for being here. Now go. Live as the woman you were always meant to be, and never shrink again.